you. Yay. Okay. Welcome, everybody. We got all of this crazy new tech stuff figured out. You know, we are horse people. We're not tech people.
No. Colin, good for you. Good.
So welcome, everybody. We're here with Catherine today to talk about training from the horse's perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's dive right in.
Okay. Where did we start?
Jump in, Catherine.
Well, for those of you who don't know me, I've been working with Thomas and Shana for about 4 years now, since 2018. And I came on board as a Feldenkrais practitioner to help with the movement aspects and the awareness aspects of being a rider. And I'm also a psychotherapist, so I'm very interested in how we as people and how we connect to ourselves has an impact on our horses. And when Thomas and Shana came to stay with me in London, I noticed the absolute finesse that they both showed when it came to connecting with my horse and seeing the world from his perspective, and what a difference that made. So I was completely fascinated by this. And since then I have been, I have been thinking about, you know, how you guys do that and how all of us could perhaps learn to do that. So, yeah.
That's been a long journey in a way. You know, when I started to take riding lessons as a teenager, nobody really cared a whole lot about the horse's perspective or the student's perspective. It was very hierarchic, top down, you know, authoritarian. You know, the teacher dictates what the student does and the student executes, and the rider tells the horse what to do, and the horse is supposed to execute the orders without any questions and so on. And so it's been a long journey to then put ourselves in the horse's shoes, so to speak, and see the world from his perspective and think about, well, what must he be thinking? What must that feel like to him? You know, so, and you can do that on many different levels, like physically, how does that feel like? You know, what must that feel like if I ask him to change his balance in a new way that he's never had to, you know, and things like that? Or how does that feel if I sit like this or touch him like that? You know, and that's a whole rabbit hole.
And not just what they feel physically, but what they feel emotionally and psychologically. You know, they don't necessarily choose to do this, you know, and how do we reconcile that? You know, that's always been a big question in my mind. How do we reconcile that? You know, especially, you know, in mainstream training, if the horse doesn't want to do it, you just make him do it. That doesn't matter. Consent is not part of the equation at all. And this hasn't really jived with me for a long time. So as we have evolved as riders, we've tried to contemplate this perspective. You know, that the horse has a say whether they even want to be here and do this. And, you know, it may be that they say, no, they are actually allowed to say, to opt out.
Yeah, and I think it was so interesting to watch you guys meet my horse for the first time, because, and in fact, you came twice, and you were seeing him as if for the first time on the second time you met him as well as the first. And that really struck me as, yes, if we can do that each time we go to meet our horse or anybody else in our lives and see them as freshly as possible, then things become possible that maybe are out of our habitual way of being. And I found that really, really fascinating. So what was remarkable and what that takes in my mind with my language is it takes people to be very present, very much in the here and now, be very actively curious, have an open mind and an open attitude. And I felt like you both tuned into yourselves and into the horse at the same time. So there was this sense of you were listening to the horse and the horse was listening to you and you were listening to yourself. So it was this marvelous kind of flow of conversation.
Yeah. It was the first time that we met QQ, and so I wanted to maximize the information and the data that I had, and we didn't have much time, so you really have to open all, channels of communication.
All senses.
All senses, exactly. So that you can have a productive lesson, right, with essentially very little data to go on, and when you know a horse, then there is a danger that you take certain things for granted and that you assume that you know how he thinks and what he does and how he responds. It's like an old married couple, right? And then you stop listening and you start assuming, right? But horses are always changing and evolving, and if you don't approach him a little bit like he's new to you, then you miss a lot of things potentially. Like anytime he changes, you may miss an opportunity for starting or building something new, or you miss a moment where things are starting to go in the wrong direction, where a bad habit starts or where something dangerous might begin. Yeah, so I often tell my students that they should spend a little bit of time of each session pretending they don't know the horse and finding out, well, how is he today? What is he thinking? What is he feeling? How is he responding? What's the sensitivity level? Instead of just assuming that they already know everything there is to know about the horse.
It was interesting as well, because of course both of you are hugely knowledgeable, and not only in an experiential way of having been around horses and worked with horses and trained horses for a long time, but also because you have this academic and theoretical knowledge, which is quite a rare combination. You often get kind of very experienced horsemen, or you get academics, but you kind of bring the two together. And yet, despite all that knowledge, what I felt and what I feel when we talk is that you have the capacity to sort of suspend your judgment, if you like, and see what is rather than what you're hoping or expecting to see. And that for me is a wonderful way to be with an animal, because of course horses are always present. They're always in the here and now. They don't struggle with constantly dwelling in their past or desperately grasping on to some ambition for the future. They are in the here and now. And I think watching you guys, you really met my horse in the here and now. And actually, I would say you also met me in the here and now. So, because of course I was part of that situation, how he responded to me and how I was with him. You took that into account. So
yeah, that's very important. Yeah,
very much so.
Partnership between horse and rider. And
yes,
and we hadn't met you in person before.
No,
either, right?
We knew you, but we didn't know you in relationship to your horse. In person. So that's a whole different facet to the relationship too.
Yeah, and the theoretical knowledge is a sort of a double-edged sword a little bit. It's good on the one hand because you have an idea of what might happen, or it helps you diagnose what's going on. But often things are not as straightforward because there's so many variables and so many moving parts that there are always surprises, or there's a possibility of a surprise that a horse doesn't respond the way the book predicts it, right? Yes. And so you have to really watch yourself that you don't become an ideologue, but that you have the knowledge in the background, and you have a certain idea and you have a certain expectation of what is likely to happen, but nothing is absolute, right? It could always be that something completely different happens because there are other factors in play that you are not seeing at the moment. And then once the horse reacts in a weird way or unpredictable way, then you have to think about, well, where did that come from? Like, what else is going on? What am I not seeing? What am I not sensing? So that's why I find it's very important to be sort of non-judgmental and just observe. And you can ask a question, and with your experience and your knowledge, you know that there's a certain likelihood that the horse is going to react like this, right? Based on my experience, based on what I know about theory, if I do this, the horse is likely to do that. But you never know. So you have to really then stop and look, is he really acting like I am expecting?
Right.
And if he reacts the way the theory predicts, and it's all good, you can move on, do something else, ask another question. If the horse reacts differently, then you can stop there and say, well, wait a minute, why is that? let's research that basically,
That
what is going on.
That opens a whole new avenue of exploration, because that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's something for me, which I make my own challenge, is I obviously have, I have my priorities and I have my skills. I'm good at being centered and grounded and present because that's my work. And so I tend to prioritize that. But I think there's something about seeing things from the horse's perspective where I need to do more than that. I need to go into arenas and skills which aren't necessarily most readily available to me. So, I have to look at the behavior, how he's acting and the appearance and his expression and the context of what we're doing together on the day, but also the environmental conditions. There's an awful lot that you can take into account. And that is in itself a very interesting discipline, but I think it does bring you more into that mindset where you are seeing things from the other's point of view. You are standing in their shoes.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we ride and train, we often ask the horse to do something new that he hasn't done before. Or if you think of a retraining project, you may ask the horse to move very differently from the way he normally moves, or to carry himself, balance himself very differently from the way he normally does. And when you're teaching a human student, you can always explain to them, look, here is what I'm thinking, this is what I want to do, or this is what I want you to do, and here is why. And then they can see the reasoning, and then they hopefully think, okay, that makes sense. And then they're expecting that it'll turn out okay. But with a horse, you can't quite do that. You can't tell him, look, if you shift your weight onto that other side, it'll be okay. You'll feel better. And the horse may think, I have no legs on that side. I'm going to fall over. I'm going to die. I know it, or I used to, hurt on that side because I had an injury, and I'm pretty sure that it'll hurt again, right? And so then what do you do, right? Because you can't explain to the horse verbally, like to a human being. Then so I always I find it helps, especially when there is a resistance. Well, what must that feel like to the horse? What must he be thinking? Because he has very limited information. You cannot give the horse all that intellectual background and theoretical explanation to a human student.
They don't think like we do.
Exactly.
Right?
They just, they feel something weird is going on. They're asking me to do something I've never done, and I'm not sure that I'm going to survive this, and I don't know where that's going to lead, and I'm not sure it's going to be okay, right? So then you have to sometimes break things down into very small steps so that the horse can go a tiny step in that direction and then check in. Am I still okay? Is anything hurting? Okay, no, feels good. Okay. And then do another tiny step in that direction, and the horse can check in, and then hopefully with a series of very small steps, you can lead him to where you want to go. Because often, we're impatient. We want to go from here to there in one big leap. And then the horse is unable to do that, or unwilling, or they're scared, they're nervous, they're unsure if that's going to be okay.
Right. I think the difficulty is our own human attachment to our own ideas and our own expectations. You have to suspend that to be able to step into the horse's perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a skill that we can all cultivate.
And I think also there's something, isn't there, about, there's a tendency, I think, for us always to be leading the horse where we want to go.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think there's something more to that. If you really want to train from the horse's perspective, there might be the possibility that they also have some ideas of where they want to go, and that you can sometimes join them, and you never know where that might take you.
Yes.
It might take you to landing on your butt, like that happened to me on Monday, but that's another story. But actually it's an interesting moment, because I wasn't, in the moment when I landed on my butt, I wasn't actually present with my horse. I was chatting to my friend.
Oh, yeah.
And if I look at it from his perspective, maybe he thought that he needs to be in charge because we weren't paying attention to what was in the environment, and we weren't. We were having a good old chat on a loose rein.
And it could be that he gave you a warning sign and you missed it because your attention was elsewhere.
Exactly. So in a sense, I trusted him in that moment, without really thinking about it, to be the one, him and his friend, to be, you know, leading the way. And they did that in horse style, which was, I think we've seen something we better get away from. But it's a really interesting thing, because I think there is, if I had stayed more in the dialogue with him, then I'm, as you said, Shana, I might have heard him go, oh, what about that? You know, do I need to be alert to that? And I might have went, no, that's fine. Or I might have went, you're right, you know, maybe we do need to be alert. So we could have been alert together.
Yes.
And that's something a little bit further beyond, well, I'm going to lead you here because I want to.
Yeah, there are a couple of things in there. Focus is really important. And my old teachers, they drilled that into us, always pay attention. You know, they wanted us to pay attention absolutely 100% to the horse and to what we were doing, always be 100% present.
Yeah.
And they wanted to be the horses to be absolutely present and attentive to us. And the thing is, if your mind wanders, the horse's mind wanders, in a way you have to capture his attentiveness and his curiosity, and you have to keep it. And if you have a dialogue with the horse, he may not even know or, you know, see or hear anything that's going on around him. But if you drop that conversation, you leave him to his own devices, then he'll get curious about what else is going on. And that can potentially be dangerous, right? If you let his mind wander.
Yes.
And plus, if your mind wanders, then you're not noticing the little warning signs, like Shana says, then you miss things. And with some horses, that's a dangerous thing, right? Depending on you know, personality and age and so on of the horse. Some horses need to be closely supervised at all times, right? And other horses are so laid back that it's okay, that nothing bad will happen, even if you just chat with a friend. But if you have a little bit of a challenging horse or a very green horse, stallion, then you better pay attention.
Yeah.
Gotta love the horses. They keep us humble.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, we're talking about focus, if you like, but from what I know of human beings and myself, we do struggle to be that present.
Yes.
In the way that you're talking about it. And I don't think that many people sustain that for a whole amount of time that they're with their horse.
Certainly not
entirely. Not entirely. There's going to be moments where we go into some idea we have, you know, because we're not just in the here and now, you know, we're not. And that's okay. And sometimes it's needed as well. But it's something about recognizing it, isn't it?
Recognizing it and being able to facilitate an easy transition back. You know, because it's not to shame ourselves for having other thoughts. Just like when you meditate, it's not that you want to sit there and be ashamed of, you know, the thoughts coming up. You acknowledge them and then come back. It's that transition that's important. And the same thing here. It's that transition to noticing that your attention has wandered and to transition back. And that is a muscle that we can strengthen, essentially, that ability to come back easier, to notice it sooner.
But training can be, I mean, focus can be trained.
Yeah,
definitely. It becomes a habit, you know, it becomes a discipline, a mental discipline in a way.
But there's a difference between focus and presence.
Yeah, that's true.
Interesting. That's interesting.
I'm not talking about focus, but in a way, I know exactly what you mean by focus, being zoned in on what you're doing. But there's a difference between that and presence, because presence.
What's the difference?
Well, to my mind, presence is more expanded. So you're more expanded not only into the context that you're in with your horse, but it's wider, so you can feel a wider part of the environment all around you, and wider and wider and wider. And that is different from focus, which tends to be very tunneled in on the task. It doesn't have to be, even it can be softer than that.
It can be,
but there is a difference between presence, as I understand it through the more Buddhist sense, and focus in how I understand it as a performance related in the zone thing.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good distinction. That's a useful thing.
And I don't think horses are very much engaged in focus. They are present, which is a different thing. It's not that they...
You can draw them in. I mean, you can involve them in a conversation that becomes so focused or so intense that they forget all the things that are going on around. So, I mean, some horses start out spooky and nervous, and then you begin this conversation and the training, And then they become calmer and they listen, and then you feel like all their attention is on you and none of the attention is on the environment anymore.
Because it becomes so interesting to them and simultaneously safe. You know, it's like if you're having a conversation with somebody in a crowded bar or something, it can be such an interesting conversation. You forget there is music playing and people drunk fighting over there and all this stuff going on. Because all that seems to start to exist is this conversation, and an hour can go by and you didn't even notice it because of this conversation. That's the sort of entrenched dialogue that can happen.
Yes, and actually it's an interesting one, because in a sense what you described there, Shana, where you're in the bar and everything disappears apart from what's there with the two of you, in a sense that's also a focus, but how present are you? Because you're present to that person, but maybe
you're not focused on the environment.
Exactly.
You're not aware.
So, and it's not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just drawing the distinction.
To be aware of it.
And you know, and I don't, if we're going to think about the world from the horse's perspective, it might be absolutely the most enjoyable thing for your horse in that moment to just have full attention on you. And it might not be the best thing in terms of the bigger picture in that moment. Who knows?
That's interesting. I mean,
it's what we want. It's what we want, because we want the horse to pay attention entirely to us. I'm just stretching this a little bit.
That's an interesting conversation. And it just reminds me that, you know, my teachers on the one hand, of course, they taught us to focus on the horse, but they always told to be aware of the environment, that you don't get hit out of left field by something. Be aware of other horses and riders around you. Be aware, like when you're riding in the arena, don't get so focused on your horse that you lose track of where everybody else is. Otherwise you run into somebody, you have an accident, things like that. So sometimes you almost have to have both. There's this background awareness, like a radar that's on, you know, detecting any moving objects in the area. And then, but also the focus on what you're doing with the horse. It's almost like you have to split your brain into two pieces.
And I'm going to just put something out here, and then we'll see what you guys think and what the people watching think. But I think there's something richer and more. What's the word I'm looking for? It transcends just that close focus when you're the two of you are together. When you have that type of awareness that takes in not only the arena and the other horses, but the feel of the wind on your skin, the sun, the smells, you know, everything that is part of the greater environment that we live in. I think that is almost can be a slightly transportative experience. And maybe more, and is more than just focusing in on what we're doing together about the movements in the arena.
That's interesting. So
because
different rabbit hole now.
I know.
It's interesting. It's really an interesting.
I like rabbit holes.
I know.
Rabbit holes are interesting.
I know. It's interesting.
Great food for thought. We didn't want this to go a whole lot over half an hour today, but I would like to, we had a couple of good comments in here. Do you want to kind of pull out a few? You can show them on screen, actually, which is the cool thing. We can show the comments because we have people watching on YouTube and people watching on Facebook. So this is a way to bring everyone together.
This might be a good one. Jane Forster says we need to bond like horses, trust each other, respect each other, both be willing and both be focused. We can be present at the same time, present and focused both together.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's right. And with that distinction.
Right, exactly. Often we have to combine different things with each other in riding, and find a balance between, like the balance between focus and awareness, that one doesn't preclude the other, you know. And that's often the biggest challenge, to find the right balance between things that are sometimes opposites too, like energy and relaxation, you know, for example, you know, the impulsion and calmness, you know, like we have to find a good harmonious balance between them. If you just have one or just the other, it's usually not enough. So
Jennifer Morris says, I'm guilty of being in the present, but only so that I can plan what the horse should do next. Waiting without anxiety is so difficult. I really agree with that. I think that's an incredibly perceptive thing to say.
Yeah, we can show it here on
screen. Sorry, the second from the top.
Yeah.
Not for you.
And I think
not for us.
Not for us. I think a lot of people experience exactly that too. It's like you've heard it. People say that we listen not to understand, but to plan our next.
Exactly. Oh. Guys are breaking up a little.
Right, so find an opening thing that we don't really need. What's that? Catherine, I couldn't hear, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say you were breaking up a little bit.
Oh,
yeah, the internet was breaking up a tad.
Yeah.
On internet. Let's see.
Jane Forster, I love this rabbit hole. Horses teach us to be present and we can teach them focus. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's actually a rather nice exchange in terms of the conversation.
It is. And oops, Babs says I'd say that it's a spiritual engagement with regards to what Catherine just said. That's an interesting thought too. Here. Yeah, Jennifer Morris. I mean, I heard a quote that when you are certain of the outcome, you can wait without anxiety. Linda Tellington-Jones. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess that's probably true. If you trust the process, if you trust that it will happen as you envision it.
Yeah, right. It's not being attached to the outcome. It's that you trust in it. I think that there's a difference there, right?
Yeah, it's and maybe this is for another day, but there's something about, I think anxiety often arises in those moments where there's a pause and a rest in the intensity. You've moved through something which was important for you, something that you were engaged in, and then you move through it, and there's often this small pause and gap between the end of one cycle and the start of another, and I think that's where people get anxious and will tend to rush through. So that then they'll kind of think, they'll go into their thinking or their analysis or their feelings of anxiety of, they don't around uncertainty, etc., etc. So, but it's
of course, if the horse doesn't react the way they had anticipated, that is always anxiety inducing for all kinds of reasons, right? Yeah. Because then they're also at a loss of how to handle that, how to respond to that if the horse gives them a different answer than the one they were hoping for. So I think
it's about digestion. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about digesting something, and sometimes humans are not very good at digesting, pausing and waiting, but we're pretty good at moving on to the next thing which catches our attention. Oh, a little breakup.
Let's show this one, and then we need to wrap it up.
Aiden, hi Aiden. Aiden says very interesting on focus versus presence. My mare Hannah will focus on the task, but needs lots of moments of presence. Too much more going on around her. I used to get annoyed with that, but now I allow her experience the wider environment. And she seems.
I have to take it off of there to read it.
Okay, she's happier. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, isn't it? And it's that sense for me of. Shana, you talked earlier about that really intense conversation that you have in the bar where everything else disappears. And we also need to move away from that.
Right.
And maybe horses just sometimes a horse like Hannah needs to move away faster than you want to, Aiden. She wants to move away from the intensity of the connection or the conversation you're having. She needs to experience the wider environment, and then she's ready to come back.
Yeah. Maybe she needs that to digest, what you were just doing, And horses definitely need that thinking time to process, especially when you're changing the balance or things like that. And then they often need time to think about it and to experience that change in her balance. It's why I like just doing a simple circle or whole school at the trot or the canter, after we've done something more involved, something more complicated, or something new. So the horses get a chance to experience that change in their body without any demands being placed on them. Just go around and just feel, into yourself what that feels like, And then once they had a moment to do this, and you had a moment to feel into the horse and what the new balance feels like, then you can move plan your next move and the next exercise, and then you can, make an informed decision, and then it goes a little bit like that. Do something intellectually a little bit stimulating or challenging, and then let the horse cruise a little bit and think about it and digest the new feel in the body.
Morris had a comment about this.
Oh, that's exactly, not savoring the present, but eager to rush on to make the next thing happen, correct the problem just occurred.
That is exactly where that's a classic,
Been there, done that many times.
Everybody has, of course. We love problem solution type thinking. It's very neat.
Facebook user says,
hello, Facebook user, whoever you are.
I'm not sure about trying to train a horse to be unaware, unpresent in his environment. This is his nature. How about helping the horse remain present in his nature, but trust us that the current environment and task are good for both me and I have to unshow it to for the good of both me and and the horse just thinking.
Yes,
I probably want to teach the horse to be unaware.
You guys are breaking up again a bit. Thomas, you're breaking up quite a bit.
Us his attention, so we can have us.
We're having a lot of
yeah.
Well, at the end of the time, anyway, we should
break it up.
Come to an end.
We should break it up as you're breaking up. Yes, it's a great question. Facebook user, the mysterious Facebook user, had a great thought.
Yes, and
get to it another time.
I agree. It's not about training the horse to be unaware.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's recognizing that absolute need to be aware and present.
Thomas in slow-mo.
Internet connection.
Lovely Portugal internet.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for watching.
We're going to continue to have a couple more conversations about this, so stay on watch for these. They'll be on Facebook and on YouTube. And for those of you that are in our courses or in Ritterize, we're also streaming it into the group for you. So or in the Ritterize group, I should say, not in all the groups. Yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, and it is recorded. Yes.
Yes, it is recorded.
It is recorded. Yes.
You can watch the replay. So
okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.